welcome to the Provincetown Public Library and our 5th book festival. This is a really exciting event for us tonight because Paul Lisicky was here for the first book festival in 2016. So that makes it feel really special to me. And speaking of the book festival, I want to thank Nan Sonater. She is the book festival director, and she's the force and the lifeblood behind the festival, and there's no festival without Nan, so we're really grateful for her bringing this to us. I also want to mention that after the reading, there'll be a book signing in the bowsprit room at the end of the ship. So welcome to Life at the Edge of the World with Paul Lisicky. Paul is the author of 6 books, including Later, My Life at the Edge of the World, which was an NPR Best Book of 2020. Also, The Narrow Door, a New York Times Editor's Choice, as well as Unbuilt Projects, Burning House, Famous Builder, and Lawn Boy. His work has appeared in The Atlantic, The New York Times, Plowshares, and many other places. He is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Fine Arts Work Center, where he has served on the writing committee since 2000. He directs the MFA program at Rutgers University Camden, where he is associate professor and editor of Story Quarterly, and he lives in Brooklyn. And so please welcome Paul. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. Some of you have heard that this is my first in-person event since October 23rd, 2019.
Yeah.
And, oddly, I looked at my resume, and I've done 50 events since the start of the pandemic, but they've all been in the little window of the box. So I'm so used to presenting myself. With a ring light and thinking about my name and probably wearing a shirt that's been worn too many times because you can get away with that kind of thing. But so this book Later came out on March 17th, 2020. So it was right at the start of the pandemic. There was an extensive 22-city book tour planned, and I found out pretty much the week before that one event was going to have the next and the next and the next. And somehow I and my co-readers and the lovely and gracious bookstore owners I worked with, we all figured out how to do something on the spot. And I think my very first event involved sitting on my living room floor cross-legged for 2 hours because I didn't understand how to place a laptop in the most appealing way for an audience. So thank you again for being here. I'm often asked why I started this book, and I'll say that I began it in 2015, about 6 weeks after my father had died. It was a time, my father's final months were super tough. He would go into hospice, leave hospice, go back home, find out that certain family members had sold many of his objects, and he'd be stunned. And then he'd go back into hospice again, come back home. We'd go to the supermarket together in Florida, and I say he graduated from hospice 3 times before his body finally let go. And I couldn't help at the time think about the trajectories of so many people I was close to with HIV and AIDS. And what happened after he died was that I assumed that my brothers and my brother's wife would all get together, and I think the end of that life was so disruptive and full of competition between the siblings that I was kind of on my own and had no one to grieve with. 24 hours after his death, I thought, where do I go? And I went back. I bought a plane ticket and came to Provincetown. In part because this place gave me so much solace and support and affection I felt very included by this place at an earlier point in my life, and it was just logical. I didn't even have to think about it. This is where I'm going, and I think I was kind of porous and strange on the street when I ran into one of my exes who appears in the book on the street, and he said, "Paul, how are you?" And I said, "My father died," and it was completely, I couldn't not be truthful, and I think I was freaking everyone out. So I say all that because I think I was using that energy to write this book. It seems to me that most of my work might be about one thing, and it ends up, the energy comes from another event. And I don't know if it's helpful for you to know that, but I just finished a new book that's essentially about my father and his experience with overwork. And I use that as a way to talk about my own experience with overwork in my own job. So I think that's all you need to know right now. I'm going to read a little bit from this book. I think we're going to do a Q&A, and then I might read a little bit more, then we can go back to a Q&A. I really need all of you to help make a conversation here. Andrea Lawler, my dear friend, and I were going to do this together, and it just turned out that Andrea couldn't be a participant. So I need all of you to be Andreas and to ask any questions, not just about this book or Provincetown in the early 1990s. You can ask questions about writing or my writing. I'm really happy to have a conversation about anything you want to talk about. So, am I speaking loud enough?
Yes.
Okay. So I am going to start somewhere in chapter 2. This is I'm editing a bit from the sequence that appears here, but you'll get a sense of what's at stake during my arrival to town. The other thing is that this is 30 years, just about now, it's 30 years from the time I was a fellow at the Fine Arts Work Center, which is so hard to conceive because I still literally think of myself as a 27-year-old. So I can't really get that disjunct reconciled in my head. All right, this is called, from chapter 2, this is called Wanting. Each little section has a title. Wanting. In pictures from that time, it looks like my body and brain aren't speaking to each other. Certain parts ignore the other parts, and the ribs' lats obliques, the shallow channel above the tailbone, they don't believe they matter. I expect clothes to do all the work of identity, as does practically everybody. In the era of AIDS, clothes are enormous. They function as armor or drag. They bestow power, but also swallow up whoever pulls them over their heads. Maybe the greatest taboo involves drawing attention to the body, as so many are losing theirs, waking up to find their wrists thinner, chest marked with spots and scale. And yet my longing to stand out through a pattern or a color is so strong I can't help but get it wrong. Pent-up desire makes me a little nuts. It makes me porous, warps my perception. Weird words come out when I don't expect them to. Desire flushes me with shame, the kind of shame I want to rub out of my skin until it relaxes. The real me is not here, but in the future. Circus. The car climbs the hill, and at the top, wild space opens up ahead. And there it is, rising out of the water like a question, an illusion across marsh and Platinum Lake. The Pilgrim Monument, a 25-story replica of a tower in Siena. The curved coast of the harbor, shining. The spray of boxy white cottages along the beachfront. Fishing boats, sailboats, boats of all types pinned to the surface like thumbtacks. Up Route 6, I've been driving in deepest New England, charming and astringent, or through a version of my childhood woods thick with pitch pines. And from here, it's a tree-shorn city, stranger because I haven't driven toward a city in hours, not since Fall River. Who would ever tell that it's all of 3 blocks wide, 3 miles long, a long, reclining anaconda of a place? And maybe that's why every attempt to lay it out comes up short. Every representation stretches out into failure. The temptation is to paint it gold and deep green because that's what it stirs up in me: safety, connection, expression. But Provincetown is neither warm nor cold, and it's never in between. A simultaneity of masks, a place constantly shifting like the light and the dunes. What should I expect of a town built on dunes? I make the left turn onto Conwell Street. I pull into the parking lot between 2 buildings, one long and relaxed, the other stubby. A barn with a blue circular plaque on the shingles. No one's around but for a young woman with hunched shoulders carrying pots and pans from her car to a doorway. I loiter in the car for a minute, head down, moistening my dry lips. Why is my pulse racing? Maybe she'll go away. When she leaves, I walk into the office. Friendly, tight handshakes. Michael? Robert? I tell myself I cannot forget their names, and then I instantly forget their names. The person in charge passes a key into a tiny manila envelope and offers me a handout of instructions. Movie. It's October, and life is about to change for all forms: animals, humans, plants. Town seems less like the beach towns of my childhood and behaves more like a metropolis. The harbor is secret, tough to find. The openings narrow and few, smelly, weedy, industrial. No settler could have predicted tourism. Who'd ever want to visit the windiest place on the East Coast, where loose sand once buried the houses to their eaves? It must have made sense to wall off the water, to shut down the view. For mariners and fishermen, the sea was work, the life they wanted to get away from. That sea could murder you too. So the street means more than it does in other places by the sea. Commercial Street is as wide as a rural drive, constrained on either side by stores. It pretends it's a boardwalk, but has no open horizon to calm frenetic minds. People don't disappear. People are larger here. Voices, faces, gestures, the cuts of jeans, shirt patterns. Clothes appear to be chosen experimentally, expect to be remembered, recorded. Commercial Street purring with the expectations of a catwalk, even when there's no one awake to spy, interpret, pass on what they've seen. Haven. How far has my life been from my body, my breathing, my posture, my silliness, my joy? I stand up straighter, my shoulders fall backward, as if they've been held up for too long by pulleys and strings. My walk changes too, or so I imagine. My heels strike the pavement as if I'm possibly damaging my feet. This is what power feels like, but only when power is spread evenly, or when queerness isn't othered, but is central. I look at people's faces. People look back at me, not exactly with need, but curiosity. Who are you? And never the stench of judgment. No expressions that say ugly, weak, failure, get out, go back to your country. To be freed from the day-to-day expectation that someone's out to kill you. The air alive with released human energy. But how will I ever be able to leave this haven so far from the repression and punishment of adulthood? Am I trapped in sweetness now? I've been given the cake of the afterlife, and I can't help but taste the chemical on my tongue. Mystery. From now on, I'll call it town, capital T. In that way, I'll keep it a mystery, take it back from all my old associations, commercial, poetic, a visual artist's capital of light, anything too sociological, anything known. Town, as much a myth of community as a place attached to the earth, Town embedding a notion of how to live with one another, even if it's falling short of its ideals. Yes, failing on a daily basis and still going on. Town moves on two tracks at once, the time of narrative, in which people want things and lose things, and lyric time, which has nothing to do with the clock. It floats, and it isn't quite attached to the town, but is part of its structure, what draws people here whether they realize it or not. Clock time moves forward, but lyric time moves off to the side and stalls, lateral instead of linear. It's time as enacted in a painting or a poem or a song. It was around before humans, and it will exist long after humans are gone. The grid. I've grown up thinking of the ocean as being in the east, so why is the water in the west? Town scrambling my coordinates once again. On a map, the cape appears as an arm bent at the elbow, hand gone absolutely relaxed. Town situated in the final joint of the longest finger, the fuck you finger, facing southeast. The center point of a spiral, a fury of wave and windstorm and sand. Who knows where I am now and now and now? Though I love music that shifts rhythms, tears up the harmonic structure, and changes key just as things get safe, I'm probably drawn to these qualities because I'm more attached to the grid than I know, a north-south directional attunement that lets me guess the time and temperature within a shade or two of the exact reading. But there's no grid here, at least not one aligned with the compass. West means as much as south. It's like living inside Joni Mitchell's Hejira, in which the guitar is retuned to preposterous notes, and I'm left to find the chordal shapes on my own. Nights of Cabiria. On some nights the moon in town is the moon from the Tempest, but with sex and menace in it. It sweeps down on the rooftops and harbor. There's no other place I'd rather be. It tells me I was foolish to expect anything less of the world than this. Why am I always putting up with less? The harbor is a cup that was made for this moon. It holds and shimmers it, backlighting the shapes of the boats in the breakwater. The light doesn't move in a straight line. Instead, it concentrates, shifting to the left and right like a river moving downstream. There's even an oily pool in the center of that light, water upon water. It's so strong it falls outside its corridor, throwing sparks that shock and dazzle the surface. Rather than a Shakespeare moon, it is a Fellini moon, transferred from film stock to everyday life. It doesn't hold itself to the harbor, but saturates the houses too. I'm not here on Earth anymore. Every street in town leads to this light. It knocks whatever trail of thought I'd been following right out of my head. Maybe I can't even hold a conversation when this moon is nearby. Brenda Shaughnessy's moon. You change shape and turn away, letting night solve all night's problems alone. Is this like the devil? If so, the devil has never been so pretty. It works into my room, works into the cracks between the cabinets, underneath the rugs, until nothing is left unlit, untouched, uninfected. Nothing can hide from that moon. Just two more sections. Golden Gate. Maybe it's easier to leave the world when it's unstable, pitched on the end of a peninsula, indeterminate as the fog that rolls in over rooftops, dormers, houses on hills, forking through the oaks and hickories as if they're redwoods. The Lamp. Commercial Street is dense with apartments and rooms impossible to ever fully know. Other towns live beneath the visible town. I don't understand the conventional explanations of ghosts, but I do understand boxes of ashes stashed beneath drafting tables, the ugly shirts of the young dead still hanging in closets, the young dead crying, now, get rid of them now. I don't want to be remembered by that tacky thing, too vivid and out of date. And meanwhile, a man, I'll call him Tom, turns on a cheap little lamp, not suspecting the dead live in that lamp. The dead light up the room for an hour, while Tom drinks a beer gone flat, scratching his nose and watching the 6:30 news. Thanks so much for listening. So that's like an abridged version of chapter 2. So we could talk for a little while, and then I can read from something closer to the end. Any questions about anything? I silenced you. I terrified you. I'm a very friendly teacher. I always get my undergrads to talk. I'm teaching a class called the singer-songwriter this semester, and on Thursday I watched a group of 18 and 19-year-olds fall in love with Joni Mitchell's Blue over the course of an hour, and it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. At first it was like, geez, could you please act like you're interested? And then I played All I Want for them, and we talked about it. I played Blue, and they all wanted to hear it again, and they were speechless. And so I don't think that was as much. It was how they picked up on my love. Yes, sir.
How do you write? Do you have a journal, or do you have a certain time or a place that you do writing?
I don't have a journal, but I do try to write. These days, it's far less than a prescribed time during the day because I have a lot of things pulling at me, as we all do. But I'm sure we all have like 5 jobs. So, in addition to teaching, I'm the MFA director, and then there's the other work involved, aside from writing, in keeping one's own career alive and doing alternative teaching. So some of the writing that interests me most happens when I'm not trying, when I'm standing in line for coffee and I'm bored and I know I have a 10-minute or 5-minute wait ahead of me, and I pull out my phone and something happens. I often start writing a half hour before teaching because the stakes are low. I don't have to be good. I can just do an experiment, and often what comes out on the page is much more it's much more organic and spontaneous than it would have been if I punished myself by getting up early before work. So, it depends on the project. It depends on the stage of the project. When I finished the new book over the summer, I was writing. I'm lucky enough to have summers off, aside from answering emails from school, and I was writing 4 times a day. And it felt like a joyous sickness, and I think it's something that we all who write want to be in that space, but it's unsustainable because it's just asks too much of your brain and your body and your stamina. But, yeah, it's really changed from book to book. When I was a kid, my father said I could be a writer, or gave me permission to be a writer as long as I achieved. So I did everything possible to make it look like work, especially when I was still living at home, and that I'd walk up from the basement God, this was so hard, and I'm so exhausted. And luckily, I'm freed up from that drama. January?
So how did your process change over the pandemic? Specifically, when it first happened and we weren't moving around. Some writers, just leaned in and just wrote more, and others felt, somewhat paralyzed for a while.
Yeah.
How did it change? How was it for you?
Yeah. Could I ask how it was for you first?
Oh, no.
No. Then you or yeah. For me, well, for the first couple of months of the pandemic, I had to do a lot of stuff with this book, so there really wasn't time to write. But I was lucky enough to be on sabbatical last fall, which, in many ways is a gift. Nearly always it was a gift, but oh man, I've been taking sabbatical now during this fraught time, and we're all collectively depressed and, feel locked in our homes. And so I did my best to push myself to create every day. It helped to come up to Provincetown for a couple of weeks in October. And I felt committed to, I didn't want to waste my sabbatical. And I sort of burned out by the end of November. And and then didn't write too much, with the exception of a book, a small essay assignment that came in March, which was terribly, terribly difficult to do. Somehow this new book came together. I thought my new book was going to be 2 or 3 years out, because it was just an accumulation of 5 or 6 years, and somehow it all, like, the pieces started clicking, and that was exciting. I think that just had to do with some deep animal need to make something after not feeling present enough, not feeling as present as much as I wanted to be in my work. Did you write during the pandemic?
Well, I did. I mean, fits and starts.
Yeah.
It wasn't consistent.
Right.
But I didn't, in the beginning, we didn't know how long things would last.
Right.
So I didn't want to, so I just sort of made up my mind to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all good, so. So I grew a good amount last year, slowed down a little bit this year, had a nice month of being in flow in April, and I'm still trying to get back there.
Good. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not about productivity as much as it feels like my active presence. It's an act of being in my skin and being in my mind and being in stillness. And I go crazy when I'm not maintaining that practice. So, yeah, if I hadn't written during those sabbatical months, I would have been lying on my couch, depressed, and going from website to website to website until my eyes burnt out. So, yeah.
I did a fair amount of that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world. You're, making discoveries. There's something poetic about that wandering. But, sometimes I think there's something to be said about pushing oneself to work. Thank you, Polly.
Whenever I read your book, and I've known you and I've seen the same things as you, but when you were reading, I was wondering about your process, about how much of that is mind from memory, and how much is so vivid, and how much of it is if you ever had to go back and look at things again, or stroll around and think about, like, look at the moon and get. I'm using the moon as an example.
Yeah. That's a great question. This is the Polly, my dear friend, who's in the book, for those of you who have read the book. So, yeah, we've been pals for 30 years now. Yeah. I don't simply record what I remember. I try to write what I don't know, and that feels like the entry point. I don't want to. Yeah, it seems incredibly static just to represent some known thing, because it's not energizing, and I'm hoping that if I am writing toward discovery, the reader can participate in that energy. So with each of those sections, while centered around an image, embeds a question or some kind of thematic constraint. So, I get excited when, I think about it, I write about a bowl in the room, and then it summons up the window and the way the light fell through the window onto the bowl. And there's something incredibly thrilling about that dredge work. It's also the case that I know this book, if I've written it, if I decide, I could still decide to do another version of it in 15 years if I wanted to, and it would probably be a much different book. It would be informed by what was going on in my life at that time. And yeah, the scenes, the inquiries on the page would be a lot different. So yeah, there's something freeing about saying, oh, this is a truth that's bound by place and time. And, you know, there are multiple truths. There are multiple Provincetowns, as all of you know. I really did not want this to be the definitive Provincetown book. There was something so liberating about saying, I don't have to do that after having done lots and lots of research and thinking, well, really, like, where is the silence in the archive? What can I contribute? What gifts do I have that could be helpful, and talk to other books out there? Yes.
Well, still living in the midst of the pandemic and watched how quickly the nation's resource gathered around a vaccine. I'm wondering if you're like me and had a lot of thoughts about having myself lived through the AIDS pandemic and resources were so spare. If you had any reflections about contrasting the two pandemics, and we still don't have a vaccine for AIDS.
Right. And think about it, so it was like 1981 when the New York Times wrote about those cases, the first cases, even though we know they were happening before then. And between 1981 and 1995, I think protease inhibitors came out in 1995. So that's a hell of a lot of time and a hell of a lot of deaths and a hell of a lot of people hurt and partners and friends hurt. So yeah, there's something startling to see how quickly the systems gathered to put all their resources into this particular vaccine. So yeah, I mean, we were perceived as a marginal community. We were perceived as expendable. And HIV itself is so complicated. It really, it feels, I mean, it's psychological. I haven't really unpacked it. It feels a lot different from COVID. And in part, it takes a long time for the disease to play out. There's a long time between infection and symptoms. Whereas, you know, with COVID, like my brother's partners has family members who felt sick on a Tuesday and died the next day. So, I mean, there's the drama of time involved in all of that. It's hard to talk about the two with, you don't want one to beat the other or want to say one was worse than the other. And I still have to look at the statistics about how many people who have died of AIDS in the world who still are dying of AIDS from the world. It's something like 37, I believe, million. It's in the 30 millions. It's ongoing in so much of the world. So, yes.
Could you extend a little bit of what you said earlier about place and time? Because when I think about a place like Provincetown that's so freighted with meaning made by other artists who come before you and writers, like when you were sifting through that, how did that inform the meaning you make of the place, or did you go through it and then put it all aside? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, it occurred to me that I couldn't write this book without constraints. If I didn't put some constraints of time around the book, it would have been disorderly. It would have tried to do too much. It wouldn't have had a pulse to give to the reader. So I decided it was going to be between 1991 and 1994. And that follows the trajectory between coming to town and hoping to be in love and being with a couple of people and then having a painful breakup. And I wanted once I put that constraint around the book, I realized, oh, the book has a thematic purpose then. It wants to think about the interrelationship, the psychology of the possibility of AIDS, of seroconverting, and how that impacts our sense of futurity. How does that impact our relationships, the way we love, our friendships, all of our attachments, our sense of identity. So, yeah, so like those literal constraints of time helped crystallize the main arc of the book. But yeah, I mean, and I think the sense of art in this book is probably different from our sense of art being made in Provincetown right now. I mean, I think a lot of this work was like work that didn't have that was being made at the time was work that didn't have a high price tag on it. And yeah, it's just, we're in a different place. Yes?
I wanted to talk a little bit about what it was like for you today, going back and writing about those days of HIV. And, you know, it's a very different, you know, as someone who lived through that period, it's a very different period. If you talk to young people today, it's a very different situation than, you know, we had. And I wonder what that was like for you going back, you know, from this perspective, and going back.
Yeah, I mean, the book goes back, there's a forward, an epilogue, or I forget what I call it. There's something like a coda that speaks from the present, that speaks about being on PrEP and being a part of gay and sexual communities where people aren't encumbered by the fear of seroconversion. So, what was it like to do that? It's really hard to say that succinctly. I feel, you know, in an honest way, we're not supposed to think of memoir as therapeutic. I mean, this is art, and my hope is that it's a document that all of you in this room can participate in and bring your own experience to. But honestly, ever since writing this book, I've been much less death obsessed. Weirdly, my father dies in my new book, but it's not really a book about the loss of his body, and that seems kind of miraculous to me now. So I think those early years, honestly, were so present with me. They did not feel distant at all in time. I felt like the psyche of that young man was still with me today, even though I'd had plenty of experience since then, and even though, you know, not that many people in our particular culture were dying. And yeah, it still seems shocking and exciting to me, or at least from the position of 2018 or 2019, the fact that you could have sex kind of without all of that old dread. Yeah, I mean, the irony is, like, then this book comes out just as COVID happens, but it's, you know, I think that's different. Does that help? Yeah. It's a great question. It's a question I'll keep thinking about. I hope I'm not looking at you like school. I could read a little more. Would that be cool?
Sure.
Okay. This is like deeper in the book, and it features two of my exes. And this is a short section called Cumberland Farms in chapter 30. I'm going to do some skipping around again. Cumberland Farms. Sometime after 9 every night, Noah and I button up our coats and strike out for the Cumberland Farms on Shank Painter Road. We walk up Winthrop Street by the cemetery, the oldest existing burial ground in town, established in 1742. Its inhabitants aren't the newly dead, but the old dead, who know there's been lots of activity in town. Nevertheless, they say, don't forget us, those of us who lived long lives, long enough to lose our looks, our usefulness, our power. Not a car or another human in sight. Constellations appear, the Big Dipper, Orion, darkness behind and ahead of us, fox dashing into the brush. Once we're inside the store, which feels overlit after all that darkness, we go right to the Pepperidge Farm display and pick up a bag of cookies. Cookies named Montauk, Chesapeake, Nantucket. They're likely spiked with preservatives, but it would be absurd to worry about preservatives at the end of the world. We're barely out of the store before we've torn into the bag, devouring them until there are just crumbs in the bag and in the whiskers around our mouths. We laugh about winter weight, but have 6 months to firm up before Noah is back on the go-go box. The night gets darker on our walk. We reach for each other's frozen hands and rub them warm. And this is why people couple up with each other. Skip ahead to a section called Some Change Went Through It All. I think I should drink a tiny bit of water. Is that it?
Please help with that.
As I trip.
Careful, it's spills.
I know, before I came over here today, I lifted my canister, what's it called? And where's the water? But I feel quite chilly. And I looked down and water was all down the front of my shirt. All right. That helps. Okay, some change went through them all. Everyone in town is here at the UU meeting house, at least town as we know it. People with associations to the art and writing worlds. Chatter in the air. People walking up to other people, greeting and smiling, but with a sense of great sadness held back. It feels more like Christmas than a funeral, maybe because so many are used to going to funerals by now that they've been rewired. They look like something else. At times they probably catch themselves thinking they are at a graduation, a wedding, or an award ceremony until they realize that someone they know and maybe loved is dead. Chips and ash inside that porcelain urn up front. Wally is in that urn, or pieces of him. I can't quite get my head around any of this. I don't want to sit in this pew or have anything to do with it. I have been to other funerals. I used to be a song leader at funerals when I was young, but this is different. I know I'm holding Noah's hand, and I know people I know are speaking. People I don't know are breaking into song, and it all feels so loving, but I can't keep still on my seat. I smooth my brows. I'm usually the adult who gets annoyed when other adults are too distracted to stay calm and focused on the thing at hand, and here I am, behaving like someone I'd make fun of. My eyes wander over the tall white walls, the trompe-l'oeil ceiling, the wall frescoes done in egg tempera. The building itself was built in 1847, but it's probably seen more funerals in the past 5 years than it saw in the 25 years before that. What does a building do with all that ceremony, that intensity? Does it lose its carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen? Is it still living? Is it watching us? Do all the layers of feeling or holding back that feeling alter the composition of the beams, the supports, the floorboards? Do they soak up that residue and hold it, keep it inside like cold Atlantic water? Or do they sturdy and flex like a bulkhead against rising tides? I could keep piling up metaphors when I know I should be present, know I should be thinking about Wally. Wally with his head on the pillow. Wally walking down Pearl Street with Arden. Wally in the garden. Wally making a joke about high colonics and cleanses. I can't. Noah and I stand up. The service is over. People are walking out into the January cold, hugging one another, promising to stay in touch when they know they'll forget. And could you blame them finally? I want to rush out the door undetected. I have done my duty. But I know I must say a few words to Mark before we leave, even though I'm afraid, childishly afraid, in no position to put on the morning suit of correct language. Even the pressed shirt, pressed pants, and tie I'm wearing feel like a fraud on me. How do others summon up the exactitude to say the right thing when language, the one we've been given, offers us but 10 words to make that happen? Virginia Woolf to the lighthouse. Some change at once went through them all, as if this had really happened and they were all conscious of making a party together on an island, had their common cause against that fluidity out there. Noah is by my side, Polly there too. I hug Mark. He feels taller than I remember him feeling. Am I crouching to make him feel that way? I don't want him to feel any less than he is. And there it is, the stunning proximity of aloneness. When my senses are at attention, it's impossible not to fall off the edge. And suddenly I burst into tears as Mark's body feels real to me. And I feel his body's ache, the body that knew Wally's body. And my tears aren't even about me, but what's to come. Lucy dying, Billy dying, Philippe dying. When do I stop? My mother dying, my father, Denise, my friend. Getting together with Mark, breaking up with Mark 18 years later. The timeline breaks, scrambles. We're held up in the menacing net over the void. I don't know what other name to call this space. Lives passing through that net, human, animal, plant, and molecules too small to see, which is another way to say time starts here. The clock is closer to an ending. We haven't been living our lives that we certainly thought we were. And all this happens within sight of Noah and Polly, who look stricken, as if they see into something I can't yet see or don't want to. The expressions on their faces pull me back to here. I wipe my eyes and nose on the back of my fist. Hold them while you can, Mark says, holding me a second longer before letting me go, as if to point out what we already know. It's all provisional. It's always been process. Even when people live and work together, share the same bathroom, same towels, same spoons and forks, same bed, and keep on living in tandem, there isn't a charm to ward any of it off. Even if AIDS weren't in the picture. There has been too much composure till now. I need to remind myself that I breathe. I have lungs I need to use again. I shift back and forth in my hard, stiff shoes, the shoes that somehow make my head ache. We smile goodbye and talk about staying in better touch. Then I grab Noah's hand, swing it back and forth, and we're out in the day, cold, bright, astringent. Where do we begin as we walk past store after papered over store? I'm just going to skip, do something sort of radical, and skip to the last page so you can hear a tiny bit from the present. And sometimes, I should leave a little break there. And sometimes when I'm touched, I think, I am in life. And that's an entirely new sensation. I'm not standing apart from myself, watching myself. To think that I've lived long enough to live through fear. But Jackson, Columbia, El Paso, Augusta, Baton Rouge. In some parts of the world, HIV is only beginning. Tender boat, still afloat, even though it's springing leaks, one in the front, one in the back. As easy to tear open as skin. It was always meant to be a wreck, wasn't it? If I try to fill it with gifts for the dead, will it make it over that wave ahead, or will it sink right to the bottom, become a cavern for fish? And what better place to go back to than my first full night in town? And here I could talk about the kindness that met me when I went into the work center office to pick up my instructions and key. And here I could say I didn't even mind how many times I banged my head against the low ceiling of my room. 7 months ahead of time, pure time. I could shoot a tiny movie right here, a movie that stands for hope, the end of isolation and the promise of company in a brute age. Is it possible to write joy? If I could write joy, it would be like soldering 5 sentences on top of one another. It would be the smell of heart tissue in attack mode, or the dread that comes with any beginning, the body knowledge that the new is its own kind of death. Maybe that's why I need to keep moving after taking every last thing out of my cherry red hatchback. I want to touch you while there's still time to touch you. So we still have a little bit of time. Any more questions? Yes, Amy. I meant to thank you and Nan so much. Did I do that at the beginning for all of your work? Yeah, so I'm really so honored and feel so much.
So happy to have you there. Thanks. You were talking about our, being about time and place, and so I'm wondering if you can talk about the process for writing The Narrow Door was different from writing later.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started The Narrow Door quite close to the end of my friend Denise's death. And I thought, the project of this book will be to record my grief over the process of a year. And I was sort of willing to write a book that might be really bad. I thought maybe this is something that's unpublishable, but I'm going to try to write in that space and take risks that I wouldn't even recommend to my students or fellow writers. So, and I wanted it seemed only right that book didn't follow the clock, that it moved in and out through time. So after the opening section, I decided to go back in time and recreate that friendship. I remember nothing of the 1980s. I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with that. I was just a boring kid in grad school who wanted a boyfriend and didn't have enough sex, and so there wasn't much to hold on to there. So the process of that was trying to think about all of that empty space. And then what happened, I'd say halfway through the book, is that my relationship of 16 years went into a crisis that seemed to come out of nowhere. And, I was still writing this book of grief. And, my husband at the time said, "You can write about this." Like, thanks a lot, but at the same time, it probably saved my life, because in order to write about how things were changing day by day, I had to have, language makes distance. And, I didn't want to write a book that, just wasn't struggling sentence by sentence, word by word with the process of saying goodbye, another goodbye. And in doing that, it was so odd. Something alchemical happened. I realized how close my friendship with Denise, who was a novelist, mirrored my relationship with Mark. I'd been involved with 2 different writers who were both initially mentors, and then things started to shift a little bit, and it got uncomfortable because I was no longer the young'un. And I don't know if I'll ever write a book like that again. That book, like this one, is written in pieces that, this actually started structurally, it was too smooth. It felt too neat. I was writing initially at Yaddo, and I had a month, and I thought, this does not feel authentic to those times. And I had to tear it apart in order for it to emphasize fragmentation. But with The Narrow Door, that's literally a record. Even though that book moves in and out through time, that's a record of clock time for about a year. So I don't know if I'll ever do that again. But yeah, thanks for that questioning. We can. Oh yes.
It's sort of related to what you said about different things you write about that. I'm wondering how, where you get people's permission when you're writing about somebody who's living their life. Do you get the permission? Do you have to read what you're writing before it's published? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, it's something you try not to be overwhelmed by as you're writing, because as you know, we're all selves in tandem and in community. You really can't write your own experience without drawing in the people who are part of your life. And as a policy, I try not to write about people I don't already love in some way, but that, it's often the case that the people I love, many of those relationships are quite complicated. And my ex read The Narrow Door as well as this book before it came out. And it was hard for him to look at both books as like literature or writing, because he was in them, but gave my approval. Another ex who appears in this book, I thought, oh my God, he's going to hate this so much. I wrote him, I sent him an email a couple of months before it came out, and I said, you're in this. There was no way I could write about these times without putting you in this book, and it might hurt you, but I just want you to know I'm so grateful that you were in my life. I'll always love you. And then from that, we became really good friends again. And we'd have these conversations, recognizing that we really were deeply in love, but things couldn't happen. There were other obstacles in the way. And I remember one text, he said, my heart is flooded with joy. It was from someone who's a very guarded person. Another ex who appears in this book has not read it and made a decision not to. And we're in contact on Instagram. And yeah, so he's a lawyer too, or was. But yeah, in the newest book, most of the people are dead. A lot of the people in this book are not with us either. But yeah, it's so tough, and it's always ethically complicated. And you have to think sentence by sentence, am I trying to get power over the situation? Am I trying to write a situation and my word matters? I'm proving my own point by writing about this person in a less than attractive way. So there's some kind of processing that goes on where you kind of grow up a little bit and implicate yourself. So, some people really love to be written about. So I'm fascinated by this. I talk to my grad students about this. I think there's a divide. Some people value or say they value privacy, and others want to be written about. I know I've been most hurt in my life by being left out of a couple of books. I'd rather someone say I was an ass than, if I was part of a particular community, than to be left out. Anything else?
Well, I missed
Yeah,
part,
no.
I missed part of your discussion, so we've already talked about this, forgive me. I'm interested that you apparently still find Provincetown to be I had the word now, a haven. And it has changed enormously. I think I moved to town in 1990.
Yeah, right.
Right, at the same trajectory. It has changed enormously, of course, since we first came
Yeah.
here. And how are you feeling the changes and, you know, coming back here upon occasion?
Yeah, I mean, I come back here quite frequently. I spent a month and a half here or more in the spring. I told my students it's going to be Rutgers Provincetown, and they were into it. Yeah, it's a different place, obviously. Yeah, money has changed a lot. And when I tell myself that, I said, well, money wasn't so much a factor in the days when we arrived. If people had money or trust funds or came from money, they hid it. You know, they made sure it wasn't known. But there were currencies. Humans find ways to make value. There were currencies then. You know, you had to be cute and funny and a big personality, and all of those things mattered. The town back then felt more welcoming to individuals, to loners, to weirdos. I think that was very important to me. I don't think I was that weird, but I felt weird, and I had very little experience in a gay community. I wasn't around that many queer people. So it just felt like, whoa, I have stepped right into my sentimental education. I was all at attention. It was a young town, right? Isn't that crazy? You were old if you were 40. We were like a bunch of babies. And there was something beautiful about that. There was something so energetic about it, but also, shit. You know, you'd have a conversation with someone at the gym on a Wednesday, and then you'd find out the next week that they'd come down with pneumonia and were dead. So there was this constant sense of change in the atmosphere. Everyone felt super alive. We wouldn't want, there was lots of tenderness and joy and camaraderie and love in those times. We would never want to be back there. It would, you know, for one thing, it would be unsustainable for us psychologically, but it was hell. So it's really it's important not to romanticize those times, even while I think it's important to say how beautiful they were. When I come back to town now, I mean, I actually get much more writing done in a way that I don't know what that's about. I mean, it feels calmer in my head. Provincetown feels like it's of the world in a way that it didn't in the era of this book. These people in this book were, in a way, rejecting the power systems out there. You know, they were trying to make a different world, and it was very DIY. It was right before the internet. One of the reasons I called it later is like, this is like the end of gay culture that was, you know, made up on the spot. It became commercialized right after that. The internet changed things, and then people stopped dying very soon after the time period in the book. So, the town for me now, I'm really interested in the tension, or the energizing tension between all of that weird wilderness out there, that sense of the unmapped, not just in the dunes, but in the sea, and this little man-made strip where everything is, we've all imposed ourselves on this plot. And I think that feels kind of fascinating to me. We can be in town and not think about what's going on out there, but I feel like those lives are talking back to our lives. So yeah, we'll continue to be a different place. I know it's like housing right now is so hard, you know, for so many people I care about. And even if one is in a good living, or, you know, a good enough living situation right now, people live at fear of that changing, and that changes the culture of a town. That's painful. So, yeah. I'm sure all of you have thoughts about that.
we're all keeping them to ourselves.
Yeah, because this will be canceled. But yeah, I try to, you know, I share the feelings, but at the same time, I try to. It's almost, it feels like prayer or something, or like, okay, how do I try to think as complexly about all this as I can. Any vital place changes. You know, I know places from my childhood in New Jersey at the shore are so devoted to being 50 years ago, and there's something curdling about that. It makes me really nervous, you know, and I think that's not good. I think this is a good place to stop. Thank you so much. We'd be really happy to talk to you.